pleasure and my honor to be participating in such an interesting event. And I said the level of the speakers and the amount of talks is amazing. And yeah, I hope just to be as interesting as other speakers. I'll be sharing my screen with the presentation. So 1 second, I should be sharing this. As it was mentioned, I belong to an organization called We Share, We in French and Share in English. We started back on 2012, exploring the impacts of digital technologies in society in many fronts. Our origin is from the sharing economy. That's why we have the sharing part. So we start looking at digital platforms back on 2012 when Airbnb was really small, Uber didn't even exist. So the crowdfunding was also at its beginning. So we've been following this trend, understanding all the positive and negative impacts of these tools. And since I would say 2 years more or less, I decided to focus my attention on the impacts of these platforms around the future of work, around the future of workers, especially because we talk a lot about the future of work, but the real subject, the real important part of this future is the people, are the workers. So what I'm presenting here is the result of a study I developed last year. I'm also writing a book on this topic as we speak, especially now during the lockdown. It's a good time to write a lot. And the impacts of the COVID confinement and lockdown are not still on the presentation. I'm happy then to discuss what, from the trends I already identified before all these situation, what is important, what is less important when we go back to some other situation. We don't know what situation. Again, I thank you again the opportunity to be here. So the first thing was to understand that our mental idea of the labor market is quite wrong in general. So I was trying what an explorer does. We never say we are experts or anything because things change too fast in general these days. So we say we are explorers. We are just curious people who try to gather new signals, strong, weak signals, and try to make a map or something that can help to have an interpretation of the new situation. And we will not be claiming that it is perfect or anything. It's just a new way of looking at things. So the first thing is the labor market itself. So there are several trends. The first one is how work is being organized, or the work life of people. So my dad generation used to have one single job during their whole life. In my case, my father was a teacher at a high school. He signed a contract and he spent like 40 years there having different roles, but that was his working life, and he was happy with his working life. That was the expectation at the time. The generation of the people who were born in the 70s, 80s, and it's probably more like, okay, let's start working. So the idea of work was different. It was more like, okay, let's be 5 years here, 6 years there, 3 years there. So it was more a sequence of full-time contracts, or usually open-ended in most cases. But our nature was to be changing, or is to be changing from work to work, and you can see these kind of patterns checking the LinkedIn profiles of most of your friends probably. And the future of work and the future of workers is more like short-term assignments, more project-based, and especially probably not even with traditional contracts. It will be more like so this kind of project-based. So there is a famous sentence saying, my dad had one job, I will have 6 jobs in my life. My children will have 6 jobs or six income sources at the same time. And this is not something I'm just guessing. It's something that is already starting to happen. This is from the labor market in the European Union, from European Union data, where the full-time permanent job is only 60% of the global workforce at this moment in Europe. So you can see there is a growing trend for self-employed without employees, self-employed with employees, part-time, temporary, full-time, temporary, part-time, permanent. So all these other forms of work, sometimes called atypical work or non-standard forms of work, are the ones growing. And especially for the new jobs. In Spain, for example, last year, there were 22 million contracts signed. 90% of them were of temporary nature. So only 10% of the contracts had some kind of permanent nature for the workers. So most of the new job, most of that is being created goes into this trend. Let's see. The second trend is the impact of digital platforms on that space. So we have a trend with or without platforms about that the work is going to be more temporary, more project-based. That's one thing. So we have these short-time assignments. And then we have the impact of technology that is making everything easier to coordinate. So the digital platforms are basically governance mechanisms that enable to scale any kind of relationship among the ecosystem. And this is happening in all types of jobs. Some of the ones you are already very familiar with, some of them you will be less familiar with. So in this study, we ended up developing a kind of a pyramid, which is an oversimplification of the situation, but it helps to explain what's going on. So at the base of this pyramid, hidden at home, so they are not visible, they are not understood, they are working remotely. They are the micro workers. This is people who are the workers in platforms like Amazon Mechanical Turk, which is probably the least known division of Amazon, Figure 8, Clickworker, Cloud Factory. In most of these platforms, people have assignments that will last for 10 minutes, 5 minutes, and they will be paid few cents, $1, $2, $3, for mostly training AI systems. So the AI systems that are supposed to be working super well need to be trained. And in order to be trained, you need to repeat thousands of times the same thing to teach the system. For example, so you have an image for a self-driving vehicle. You need to teach the vehicle what is a pedestrian, what is a traffic light, what is a truck, what is a pedestrian, what is a traffic light, traffic light, sorry, what is a truck. So you need thousands of people to show the system and to train the system. For that, these kind of platforms are being used for these large corporations, also for researchers, for example. You also need these kind of systems to validate the output of the AI systems. When you have a conversation with Siri, from time to time, there is people eavesdropping in these conversations. Afterwards, not in real time, it happens afterwards, the conversation, in checking if the conversation made sense or didn't make sense. So you need a human to validate the actual output of the artificial intelligence system, these kind of things. Or sometimes you even have impersonation. So you might be thinking that you are talking to a robot or an automated system, and in reality, there are some humans behind that space. Also, this is used for social media moderation, this kind of thing. So these micro works, people making a living out of that. If we go a little bit upper in the level of complexity, let me see if I have that working. Yeah, we go into probably the most well-known space, which is the on-demand economy. Here we have applications where we are just by tapping in a number of options, we will be able to have people to solve our problems. It's kind of magic. So people will be driving us around in Uber or Didi or Ola or 99 in Brazil. So depending on where you are in the world, you have different applications for ride sharing, or Globo, Deliveroo, Uber Eats for all the part of delivery, but you also have things for people coming to your house to clean or to make some home repairs, or even, for example, TechBuddy, which is from Sweden, will send you technicians to your house if you just bought a new smart TV and you don't know how to install it, or maybe a new router, or you have a new mobile phone and you need to transfer all the data from the old phone to the new phone. You can get assistance from someone helping you to do that, and this is going to be like technical service on demand. Or someone walking your dog with DogBuddy or Rover, or people taking care of your kids or your elders at home with Zolvers or Care.com. So you really have a huge diversity sectors that are becoming available on demand. Some of them, you don't care so much who is doing the job for you. Some of them, like taking care of your kids or your elders, it's more relevant who is coming. And there is also a kind of repetition. So it's going to be a recurrent on-demand service. So the nature of on this space can be different depending on the platform, but the basic mechanism of the underlying platforms are very, very similar. We go one level up and we have all the blue collar sector for the service sector, for restaurants, for events, for hospitality, for I think I already mentioned for restaurants. So all these sectors, or even like working in warehousing. So all these sectors are traditionally of very temporary nature, assignments for maybe a couple of weeks, couple of months, or few days if it's for an event. It's people who are looking for this kind of jobs. That used to be the space for the temp agencies like Adecco, Randstad, Manpower, these kind of agencies. And there is a growing number of startups taking up this space and being the new intermediaries between the labor and the companies who need this workforce. You have some in Europe. One of the largest ones in UK and Spain, for example, is Job Today. You also have Wonolo, for example, Work Now Locally from San Francisco, which is pretty well known. And on the right side, on the logos, you can see Adia. Adia is from Adecco Group. So Adecco Group is also taking the opportunity to digitize some of these services. Going up a little bit more on the complexity of the project, and here people tend to be paid less by time and more by project. So it's less and less hourly based. You are going to be paid more for the outcome. We have the white collar workers, the freelancers, most of them again working in a remote setting, and you have platforms all around the world trying to provide this type of talent for coders, translators, designers, people helping you with the finances, marketing, sales, all these type of jobs. You will find experts in platforms like Upwork, which is the American leader, or freelancer.com. Zubajie is the Chinese one. Workana is the leader in Latin America and starting to be active in Asia. Or Malt is originally from France and very active in several countries in Europe, for example. So here, and probably I assume that most of our audience will be probably fitting well on this area of the pyramid. And finally, we have the top of the pyramid, where there are platforms that will connect the top talent, the most experts in any area. So if you would like to have the best football player, you would have a platform contacting you with Messi or Cristiano Ronaldo. So here you will have the platforms contacting you with the best lawyer for certain things, or maybe the best person who will know a specific market in the South Asian countries, because instead of spending 3 months or half a year researching yourself on that space, you can have 1 or 2 hours call with an expert that will save you all this time. Obviously, it's an expensive service. So we have digital platforms who are intermediating among the workforce and the companies or individuals who will need all that. The thing is, at the moment, the impact of these platforms is still relatively small. Looking at most of the studies on the OECD countries, the people that create the main income source using digital platforms is still pretty small. It's between 2 and 4%, depending on the countries, depending on the studies, but it's a small figure. What is more interesting is the people who are using these platforms to supplement the income of maybe a temporary job, or even they might have a full-time job and they want to do something else. And if you look at the younger generations, these figures obviously increase, because for them it's very natural to jump into the labor market using these digital platforms. They are used to use the mobile phone for everything. They are also using the mobile phone to find work. The third trend is the other side of the coin, are the companies. This Finnish sociologist, Esko Kilpi, who recently passed away last year, he used to say, it's now more expensive to internalize than to link and to network. Nowadays, with this technology, with the digital technologies, we can assume we have mechanisms that instead of incorporating the talent in our organizations, we can use these platforms to connect with this talent whenever we need this talent, wherever we need it. So what we see is that the nature of the firm is going to be shrinking a little bit. So the core of the firm is shrinking, and more of the activities which are not the central activities of the organization can be externalized, can be dealt in a project basis using some of these platforms. And this is again not my imagination. This is already starting to happen. These are the statistics, the figures from a study from a staffing industry analyst, which is one of the leading think tanks on that space, checking how many companies, how many organizations are already using this kind of mechanism that I described before. On the yellow figure, you see the people who are using it today. On the red side, you see the people who are considering to use this kind of mechanisms for the next 2 years. And I think it's important. I don't have figures from 2019 yet, but I think it's important to see the important jump on 2018. If you are attending human resources conferences, you will see this is the new normal when dealing with talent management. So have internal and external talent at the same time and having this blended workforce. Upwork also is claiming that 30% of the Fortune 500 companies is using already Upwork freelancers. So this is a growing trend, especially I would say it's becoming normalized by most of the organizations. For that, obviously, you also need software, you need assistants in order to manage this very diverse and growing workforce. And there is a new kind of systems called the freelancer management systems. Maybe you are very used to the CRMs, the customer relationship management systems. Here, instead of managing your customers, you have systems that will help you manage your workforce, both internal and external. They are starting to mix the pool of internal talent with external talent. One of the names is, as I mentioned, Freelancer Management System, or FMS, something that you'll probably be reading more and more over the coming years. And I had the chance to attend a conference in London last year, and there was Erika Taya here, who is the external workforce manager at Novartis, and she was very clear, saying the vision for Novartis for the next years is to have 50% of the workforce as employees, traditional employees, because we need to sustain certain activities and we need continuity and the culture of the organization and these kind of things. But the other 50% is going to be on project basis. And we are going to be sourcing this talent from 4 or 5 lines. So we are going to be sourcing this talent from alumni, from previous employees, people who used to work for us and are not working for us, but maybe they can be engaged for a single project because they know the people, they know the industry, they know the culture. We're also going to source from silver medalists, people who came to a job interview and they were the second one. They didn't make it to the final position, but they were the second one, so they were very good. So it's important to keep them around and to keep a connection with them. We'll be sourcing from the talent pool of freelancers, maybe designers, translators, videographers, financial experts that we are using every year in several projects. So we keep a pool for that. And then we will also be using these digital platforms as an open talent pool where we can find new talent or talent that we need in a very specific moment. So they are developing a strategy for that. And it's important for the companies to start developing a strategy that is covering all these fronts. So the result is that we are going into a fragmented workforce. So going back to this idea of one job, several jobs in my lifetime and several jobs at the same time, we have this interesting graphic from a consultant from the States, Josh Bershin, who explains the pixelation or the pixelated workforce. So we are moving from this scenario where we used to work in one company, have one job and develop the career inside, This company, in the case of my father, was he was, as I said, a teacher. Then the situation that probably most of our audience have lived through, which is I go to a company, I get a job, and if I want to evolve in my career, I probably need to change my company to get a new job and get and evolve in my career. So this kind of situation. And now for people like me who are freelance consultants, it's about having several assignments, gigs, short-term projects, long-term projects, maybe a class, maybe writing an article, maybe doing a consultancy for some projects or for some company. So it's really complex to make sense of a career in this space because your life can be very, very different. So on that space, it's important to understand what are the impacts in workers, in firms, and in society in general, no? Because we are really moving into that space of the fragmented or pixelated workforce. So for workers, we have a big challenge, which is we used to be employees, and with your traditional work contract, you have a lot of benefits. So you have access to health insurance, you have access to a stable income, you have colleagues, which is important. Some of your colleagues might even organize a trade union. You have access to training, you have tools, you have a place to work. No, you can, if there is a conflict, you can organize some conflict resolution management. So that's why we like so much the traditional labor contract, because it's a bundle with a lot of benefits. When you become an independent worker, you need all these work environment, but the first work that you have as independent worker is that you need to recreate all this work environment. It's a lot of work, and I can say it from my own experience. So before I can be a consultant for any company, I need to find and create all this structure. So, and it's a mix of labor rights, let's say, access to social benefits, access to collective representation, insurance, dispute resolution, and some new things on the digital space related to identity, reputation, credentials, so data management, data rights, because I'll be using some digital platforms. And on the other side, it's more like my needs, which is mostly access to tools. So I need a computer, I might need a space to work, like in a co-working space. I need to manage my finances and pay my taxes, which is a lot of time. When you are an employee, the company does it for you. When you are on your own, you need to do it on your own with help with some admin consultants. You need to be constantly training and learning. And actually, freelancers tend to be more up to date than traditional employees. You need to find your tribe. You need to find your community, because being completely isolated, it's dangerous in many, many fronts. And because I can also work in different platforms and different employees, it's important that I have this kind of TripAdvisor services where I can validate and know who can be a good employer, who cannot be a good employer, and so on. Let's see that with one example of a Uber driver in New York, for example. And this is a real example. So this driver in New York, if we start from the upper part of the circle, he will be using not only a single application, he'll be using several applications. He'll be a Uber driver, but he'll also be using Lyft and Juno. So he needs to coordinate the presence of all these platforms. He will also be part of the Black Car Fund, which is a mutual aid fund set up by the cab drivers and limousine drivers, and now the ride-hailing drivers in New York, because there is no social security as we know in Europe. So they need to find their own mechanisms. They are funding that through a few cents in every trip. There is no traditional trade union. You need to organize your collective representation in different ways. So they created the Independent Drivers Guild, which is a mechanism to organize the representation of the drivers in front of the platforms and with the administration. So they've been able to negotiate like a minimum wage, for example. And you have platforms like coworker.org, which is like change.org, but applied for workers. You have a specific insurance for ride sharing, like Insure and many others, which can be activated on demand. If I'm working on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and not for the rest of the week, I need an insurance just for these days. I don't need an insurance that will cover me for the whole month. So I can have insurance on demand during this time. conflict resolution, identity, and reputation are still locked in Uber, but I think that will slowly we'll need to move that outside of the Uber application because it's important for the worker. We have AI assistant, for example, Sherpa Share. I recommend to check this website, for example, because it's a kind of AI assistant for Uber drivers that help to identify where the hotspots of the city are located and so on, so they can have they can earn more money during the hours they are driving. Hurdle is also an assistant for the payment of taxes, and it will also, for example, calculate the mileage, how many kilometers or miles you are driving, so you can depreciate, you can claim a depreciation of the vehicle, and everything is automatic. For training, you have this famous blog, which is the rideshare guy, where you can learn how to be a driver. You have app, which is Uber People, which is the most famous board and forum for Uber drivers around the world. This is where they are solving their situation and their conflicts and their doubts. And in order to evaluate the customers, in this case the passengers, you still have to use Uber, no, but you can compare with others. So this is an example. If you would be like seeing this example in a freelancer in Spain or a freelancer in Finland or in Brazil, that would be completely different setup, but the needs are similar. So it's how you rebuild your work environment using some of that. And this is called worker tech. This is a new setup of startups which are using technology to facilitate a better life for the independent workers. The other thing we've identified is that this narrative of being an independent, isolated worker is wrong. So the main character of the future of work are the collective of independence. So as an employee, we are a singleton, we are individual. And so we think that independent workers need to be also individuals on their own. But this is very unsustainable in many fronts, from an economic point of view, resilience point of view, psychological point of view. This is really not good. So what happens in any part of the pyramid, can be in the bottom of the pyramid, can be the blue collar, can be the freelancers, is that independent workers find their tribe, they join, they mutualize efforts, they mutualize in many ways, beyond the traditional union aspects. You can have collectives of couple of coders that will offer themselves to the market as a team of 5, 10 coders with certain values. Or maybe it will be a group of freelancers who will be working on the media space, on the communication space, and it will be a mix of videographers, photographers, copywriters, web developers. So it will be a mix of freelancers accessing the market as a kind of agency, for example. Or you can have some kind of cooperatives where some of the solution that I was pointing before, instead of going to a private solution, they prefer to mutualize in a cooperative way this kind of risk. So it's very interesting to see the rise of this collective of independence as the new main character of the future of work and future of workers. And obviously for the organizations, that also has an impact. And I like this summary of the Hollywood model of work. So if you think on Hollywood, probably in the Hollywood production, you have the studio where you have the producers, you have the director. So you still have the firm, which will be creating the project, funding the project, and finding the project manager. But then most of the team or part of the team will be coming on demand just for the duration of this project, in the same way that you have the movie crew joining just for the duration of the movie production. It's important in that space that people have a clear role, so they know what they are doing. They are used to work in this way, otherwise there will be conflicts of management conflicts. And it's important also to understand that if I maybe get a good cameraman, he will bring his 2 or 3 colleagues that he or she is used to work with. So again, we are going back to this collective of independence. It's not that you are hiring just a single person. You'll be hiring maybe an expert on something and his small crew of trusted peers. So we'll see the projects and the future of the firm going in this direction. And it's important that the firms develop a strategy like we've seen in Novartis on one side. So we are going to mix sources of talent, and then the management of the projects, at least some of them, will be organized like Hollywood productions. And last, and obviously not least, is the future of society, because when we talk about the future of work, we are talking about the future of society, and it has several impacts on that space. So the first is that we need to change our narrative. So the old narrative is following this arc where we used to have a period of education where we go to primary school, secondary school, and then we traditionally join university, and we were hoping that all these assets or all these skills acquired during this period will last for 40 years of work life with some training and so on, and then we can retire for 20, 30 years and then die. This is the system, this is prepared for that. But now we are living longer years, so our working life is going to be longer, and because of all the continuous change in the in technology and the works and the jobs we can do, we need to be retraining and learning on the whole time. So you can see the image at the bottom, which I think it's more accurate nowadays, and this is actually how I feel working as a freelancer. So sometimes I'm really engaged with some projects and I'm delivering value for the customer, but sometimes I need to spend maybe 2 or 3 weeks learning something new or studying a new topic, or sometimes I just need to again recondition and retire, maybe take a sabbatical of 3 months. So we need to prepare ourselves, our society, and our public policy for that, because this is a new schema. And obviously, this idea of fully retiring might be a little bit outdated also. So we'll be probably having a slope where we will be working less and less, but it will not be binary like now, where you go to work on Friday and then for the next Monday you are already retired and you have nothing to do. So I think we'll be more like a slope. And obviously in this context, we might have a debate about the need for a basic income in order to sustain all this activity. And we've seen with the COVID impact, the need for some basic income where you cannot be working. You are in a condition where you're not actually generating income. And this is the final debate on the new social contract. No, we have a social contract that has been designed for the industrial era, where people used to work 8 hours in a factory, a school, an office for many, many years, where the employer took a lot of responsibility, and where the situation of being unemployed or not generating income was a rare one. So our safety net was prepared for this kind of a small incident that were the unemployment periods. But nowadays, as we see, the situation is very different. So we need to prepare for a new social contract for that. At the moment, nothing, I would say, substantial has been done. So all the burden, all the responsibilities, all the risk, everything has been shifted to these independent workers. That's why they also collectively organized in order to be able to cope with that. But it's important that we actually distribute all the responsibilities between the state, the platforms themselves, the workers, and even the consumers. The consumers have a say on all that. And as you've seen, I'm really keen on collectives. So for me, it's not only thinking on a single state, it's more, especially when we are working through national borders, because we'll be working online. So it's more like, how can we have, for example, an European-wide labor insurance or training right or something like that, or even like labor conditions for online workers. The platforms also can collectively organize, like in a cluster for their sector. Maybe a single delivery platform like Global Deliveroo cannot do much for the workers, but if Uber, Deliveroo, Globo, and Uber Eats, they collectively organize some training, insurance, so they can better protect the workers on this industry, on this sector. I think there is something. The workers, again, collectively organized, can do many, many things. And the consumers also have a say, because we're also very keen on the flexibility of these new ways of working and on demand and everything being very cheap. But the way we consume is defining the type of labor that we are creating. So it's important that we also collectively organize in order to claim a sustainable work for the future. So this is the kind of things that we've been exploring. This is an open-ended discussion. Where again, we are not claiming to have the truth in any respect, but we are observing all these trends, and I was invited to share them with you. I hope it was interesting, and I'm super happy now to have a quick Q&A with that. Thank you for the comments on the chat. I can send you. Actually, this report was published. I'll be sharing there is a part in Spanish, part in English, but I'll be sharing you the Spanish one and the English one here on the. You can have the, and some of these links that I was sharing now. You can. The thing is, I'm sharing my screen, I cannot see the chat. That's my. And again, this is an oversimplification of the situation. There are many complexities inside these platforms, and it's important to have new taxonomies trying to understand how heterodox the situation can be, and also even depending on the situation of the worker, the conditions of a platform will have very different impacts in different individuals. If you have a high dependency of the income of this platform, you will suffer a lot more the algorithmic management of platforms that if you are just generating some supplemental income. So it's just an extra, you can tolerate a lot of conditions, a lot of situations that if you are highly dependent of this income, you will not be able to tolerate. And as I said, in some of these platforms, you are paid per time. In some of these platforms, you are paid per task. Some of these platforms have a social orientation. They try actually to provide a good working life to their, and that happens in every single part of this pyramid. I'm not sure I was sharing the screen. Let me see. Oops, sorry. I'll go back to the here. Sorry. Okay. Where can I access? Where can I access the Q&A panel? Okay, I see here now. Okay. What is the effect of the? So I'm going now to the Q&A. I didn't have that before. So no, for example, some of the I start with the easy ones. For example, the HR functions. Yes, I think they need to change. At the moment, HR functions are mostly on management and invoicing and onboarding and offboarding, which is more. A lot of these things are going to be digitized. They are already going. You have already interviews. At least the first screenings are done by AI assistants and video interviews that are then analyzed by artificial systems, and all the invoicing management can be also digitized. So the HR people will need to focus more on the development. We see that the people stay in organizations as long as they learn, no? And they have a flexible working life conditions and so on. So really more understanding and personalizing the experience. I've been reading, for example, how some HR departments are starting to shift the mindset and treat the workers as customers of the organization. What happens when your workers, in terms of mindset, become customers of your organization? So that's an interesting approach, for example. Another question is the effect of corona epidemic or pandemic on all this. Obviously, I think what we've seen is that, especially I would say in Europe a little bit, but especially in the States or even in UK, if you want, where the non-traditional workers have very difficult or impossible access to social protections, we've seen the situation developing super quickly because we had hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people completely with any kind of coverage. That's why the government had to step in with some emergency programs, emergency money in order to cover all this growing number of workers, which are the non-standard workers. So this is the first, for me, impact. The second impact, obviously, is in teleworking. Now we are all teleworking. So more and more people will find natural to use some of these platforms to find labor. At the moment, most of the demand is going down because of the whole global economic situation. But when we recover some of these economic activity, I think some of it will be through these digital platforms because they are very efficient intermediary. So labor market used to be a very analog scenario, and more is becoming digitized and more efficient, for example. So, but I don't really know what's going to happen. Obviously, nobody exactly knows. Yeah, also the base of the pyramid, both in terms of jobs and I understand also potential countries. No, I think this kind of basic jobs are being managed both in. You have workers all over the world. I recommend there is a research in Oxford. Index gig work. There is an index on the. I'm sharing that here on the chat now. There is this index that I just shared on the chat, for example, where you can see the number of labor that is being intermediated by some of these platforms. This is organized on the Oxford Internet Institute, and some of them are base of the pyramid jobs, this kind of micro workers. Some of them are a little bit more like on top of the pyramid. And it's very interesting to see the inclusivity of some of these jobs. So people who cannot have access to other traditional jobs because of their personal situation, because of their education, or even because they live in a country where, for example, having women working outside of the house is not well perceived. So there are many situations where this base of the pyramid works can develop and help on the inclusivity of some of these workers. So it's a trend that needs to be investigated in detail. There is a very interesting book called Ghost Work from a researcher, Mary L. Gray, that I recommend if you want to explore more on this base of the pyramid details. A lot of questions. Yeah, there's a question regarding, for example, the difficulties that some of these non-traditional workers have to access financial assets like mortgage or just credit. And it's true. It's one of the problems that we have in our society at the moment is that everything, both the social contract, the social protections, the education rights, and even the access to finance is designed for these traditional workers. So myself as a freelancer, in order to rent this flat, I had other problems because my partner is also a freelancer. So it was very, we were not the best candidates for this flat because if there is people who have a traditional employee contract, it might be easier for them to rent a flat or to get a credit. So it's important that we also find a balance on this area. There is a question on the unions. When we then see the rise of unions, I'm not sure the traditional union is the format that we'll see. We will see the emergence of collectives. I'll be sharing my screen again and showing you some of the. Yeah, you are probably sharing my screen now. So, for example, I would say. This is an interesting collective. It's called Oxby Collective, for example. And they are not a union, but they are a group of freelancers that they access the market collectively. So this is this kind of new collective that I was talking about. Or, for example, this is also a very fresh collective in France they say they are kind of new neo-union. It's called independence, no? So it's a kind of a joke in French. So independence, but also dependence, no? So they're interdependent. And they are mobilizing the efforts of but they cannot be a traditional union because they are not workers, they are not employees. So they are trying to represent these independent workers. Or we also see things like a smart cooperative from Belgium, for example, a smart co-op, which is a new way of mutualizing a lot of these risks. This is, for example, being used for a lot of artists and media workers and so on. It's a cooperatives covering more, as you can see, more than 100,000 associates around Europe. 4,000 of them in Europe, in Spain, sorry, but most of them are in Central Europe. Smart is a new way. So yes, but I'm not sure the traditional unions are the new forms that will perfectly fit for this need. So that's why I'll talk about collective of independence, and I'm trying myself to understand what this is going to look like, because I really have not a clear picture, but I see the emergence of all these things. Yeah, there is an interesting question about terminology. So I was reading an article the other day. It's called The Future of Words. I will be sharing. Because for some of these example, I was interested on this article the other day that claims the future of job require an entirely new vocabulary, and that's one of the questions there. It's in the Q&A. No, the future of work requires a different future of words, and for example, how to refer to this kind of non-standard workers, especially when almost 50%, even in some countries more, are not in this traditional open-ended full-time employment contract. So I usually, for the time being, I use the term non-standard workers. This is being used by several European research centers. Gig economy also, but it can be a little bit misleading sometimes. So I prefer to just say non-standard employees. This is covering the people using platforms and the people not using platforms, but who have a different kind of labor relationship. So I try to use this term, but it's a good question, and it's open-ended. 1 second. I see that I didn't properly share some of the things here in the chat. No, I would say there is one question also that for the organizations beyond the cost benefits of outsourcing, what do you think would be the benefits to have external talent working to achieve their goals? I think obviously you have a lot of flexibility beyond the cost benefit, and especially you have access to fresh talent, people who might be able to be more creative because they've been working in different. One of the characteristics of the freelancers when you are working with freelancers is because they work in different companies, they will have a very creative and very open mind and very different experiences, and they will be more up to date. And it's very dangerous in a situation where things change so fast to have very specific processes, very specific ways of doing things. In companies, we always have, this is the traditional way we're doing things. We are not going to change, or it's very difficult to change things. So having external workforce is going to force you into this dynamic of being more flexible. Also, it will force you to be more attractive as a company. You'll need to be a more human organization in terms of how you deal with your talent, because talent can go anywhere. So if you want to attract the best talent, you'll need to be the best and the most attractive company for this talent. And also in terms of social objectives. So what is the purpose of your organization? A lot of the new generations, they are interested in the money, in the learning, and in the impact of their work. I'm spending my time and my energy for what? For what kind of the future of world am I spending the energy? So it's a mix, and it's forcing you, incorporating external talent. It's forcing you to many things. Which no, I see. Sorry, Thomas. I see. Okay, so this is one link that should be, and the RSA it's not working well. So I'm sharing this one again. And please, yeah, feel free to contact me through LinkedIn or through any other means or the email, and I'll be happy to share more with references and so on. And I'm glad that the presentation was interesting for you. And yeah, let's enjoy this ride, because it's not going to be an easy one. But my modest ambition is to plot this map in order to have different questions. I think it's important to ask more about the future of workers, not so much about the future of work. So it's the people at the center, and the future of workers in plural, not a single, not just the single person, how the collective of workers are going to be the main character of this future. Muchas gracias. Thank you.
Gracias. Thank you.